Listening to that was Ryan Shorthouse, the executive chair of Bright Blue, an independent think tank that argues for liberal conservatism. Ryan, great to have you on the programme tonight. Thanks for joining us. I mean, does it make much more sense to you than it seems to Joe and I, this kind of relentless focus on illegal migration? Or would you, as a liberal conservative, rather see the government focus its efforts elsewhere? Good evening.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's a zero-sum game necessarily. I mean, it is a problem, the numbers coming, and they have been spiking in recent years. But the disproportionate focus on it is just baffling to me when, the majority of the public, opinion polls show, are concerned about the cost of living and the state of public services. And both private incomes and public services have deteriorated in recent years. And that really needs to be the focus every day of the Conservative government. But on this specific Rwanda plan, look, there is evidence to suggest there is an effective way of bringing down irregular migration. This year, compared to last year, the number of people crossing the channel is down by a third. And that is largely because of the returns agreement that the UK has signed with Albania. So it's through return agreement, good diplomacy, that we will reduce the number of people coming irregularly. I think the Rwanda agreement is madness, to be honest. At the end of the day, Rwanda have said that they can only take roughly 200 a year to begin with. And we know last year, for example, that about 40,000 people crossed the channel.
Yes.
So really, the probability of one of those people getting on a flight to Rwanda is under 0.5%. So can you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's made quite a lot of risks and danger to get to the point of being in Calais, for example, and apparently a 0.5% chance of going to Rwanda is going to deter them from making the channel crossing? I just don't think it's going to be an effective deterrent. There is evidence that the Rwanda agreement will not be a deterrent, but there is evidence that returns agreements with countries like Albania and others do. So that should be the focus of Rishi, not this Rwanda legislation.
And that's exactly why I'm so baffled by this, Ryan. As someone who just looks at number 10 thinking they should be doing what you're saying, a relentless focus on public services and the economy. Instead, it seems to me they almost think that sort of whether or not planes take off to Rwanda, regardless of whether that stops the boats or not, is some sort of barometer of confidence, whereby if they can just get that to happen, then everything else will sort of be put to one side and people will look at it and go, oh, maybe they are quite competent after all.
The problem with politics generally is that there are some people who are obsessive about things and they shout the loudest. And, a good prime minister and a good number 10 should have a grip of that and a sense of that. But there are, a small group of people on the Tory right who are obsessed with this issue and keep being very loud about it. And the Prime Minister keeps giving them more and more, goes towards them. And, he's right. The legislation which has been drafted, I think is quite frightening, really, in terms of depriving people of their individual rights and saying that ministers can decide whether Rwanda is a safe country, and there's no kind of scrutiny of that, a legal scrutiny of that. So the Prime Minister has gone very far towards these people, but yet they are still not satisfied with it. And this is the problem that Tory Prime Ministers have all the time. Ken Clarke talked about this. You keep giving them something, they keep taking it, and then they keep wanting more. When will number 10 and the Prime Minister learn that these people are not their allies and they will keep asking for something more and more radical, which is just basically essentially impossible? So I wish he would stop listening to the loudest voices.
And of course, in the process of doing that, in the process of trying to keep everyone together, his party is more divided than it's been since he took office. And once again, it's threatening, this issue is threatening to tear the Tories apart, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, the legislation, on the one hand, you've got people who are around Suella Braverman, for example, who think that because you can, it's not withdrawing us from the European Convention, migrants will still be able to go to the Strasbourg court and prevent and use human rights to prevent them from the flights being taken off to Rwanda. So it's not satisfactory for them. But to be honest, you've got the One Nation Conservatives, which I'm glad are now being increasingly louder, who are saying Lord Garnier, for example, who was the Solicitor General, now in the House of Lords, is saying that he wouldn't be able to support this bill because it deprives people of individual rights and ultimately gives ultimate power to ministers to decide whether Rwanda is safe or not. And the courts have deemed that Rwanda is not safe for various reasons. You know, the government said, well, we've taken steps now to make sure that some of the concerns the Supreme Court had are rectified. Well, if that's the case, then why do you need legislation to say it is safe? Presumably the court would be satisfied with the measures that the government have taken, but just unilaterally saying, we've decided all of a sudden that Rwanda is safe. I think it's just, I think it's quite ludicrous, to be honest.
And just finally, briefly, Ryan, so when Suella Braverman says that unless this issue is resolved, the Tories are heading for electoral oblivion, you say, well, actually, if you keep on like this, you're heading for electoral oblivion.
Well, frankly, I think they're heading for a big defeat in the election regardless. I think there's a very narrow, very, very small chance that they can now still retain power after 2024. I don't think this issue is the thing that is really tipping the public over.
It's not going to it's not going to win back all the millions of votes they've lost, is it? Ryan, great to speak to you.
They've lost their voters because of, as we were saying right at the start, private incomes have deteriorated for the average voter, and the state of public services have deteriorated. That is, the main reason. The idea that somehow Tories are in the fight now and they're not going to be in the fight because there's no progress in Rwanda, I think is just, not realistic. It's not borne out by reality.
Ryan, great to have you on. Thank you. That's Ryan Shorthouse, Executive Chair of Bright Blue, an independent think tank for liberal conservatism. Thanks again to Joe Twyman, Founder and Director of Delta Poll. Two different perspectives, basically saying the same thing. Why are the Tories spending so much time on Rwanda and illegal migration when it's simply not what most people are worried about?